Hey Andres, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well, Sebastian. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, sir. Thanks for joining the channel, and my audience is gonna love this information. I can't wait to dive in with you. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your company and how you got started, or working with Trust and Will, and we'll take it from there.
Of course, man. Yeah, I actually spent 13 years as a financial advisor. So I was on the bank channel working with families, individuals, and this was always something I saw in terms of having to have, set up probate accounts for families that passed away. They didn't have any estate planning in place. And as my career kind of progressed, I made the decision I need to do something different. There's something else out there for me. And that's when I came across Trust and Will. And it's been for me professionally really the best fit because one, in over a decade of working with families, I saw the hurdles of talking about death or how expensive it is to go through the process with an attorney. So today, we at Trust and Will are helping families really have access to an affordable online solution in all 50 states by kind of guiding them through the process. So that's a quick intro myself. I live in San Diego and I'm excited for the conversation today.
Awesome, that's great. Thank you for sharing your personal background and your journey so far. And so, some people understand trusts and what just generally speaking, why would I set up a trust? Some people have no clue. It's just not on their radar, not something they're familiar with at all. So let's talk to those people first, right? So for the person who has no clue what a trust is or why even you would set up a trust, can we just very basic, elementary explain what a trust is and why would you set up a trust?
Yeah, absolutely. So in essence, really a trust specifically. So we offer like an estate planning, right? So one, I'll kind of take a quick step back really quick. Estate planning is really helping make decisions on what assets you have and how do you want those assets distributed to your loved ones. And also in case you're incapacitated. So you can't make a decision, you can't go to a bank, whatever the case might be. It's having that peace of mind, knowing that someone can step in and make a decision on your behalf. And then I think what's really, really important as well is for parents that have kids under the age of 18. Obviously, God forbid, like nothing happens, but in the case that it does, you essentially have made a decision on who would help raise your kids, especially if they're under the age of 18. So, one misconception I'll talk about really quick, Sebastian, before we kind of dive into your question is many people think estate planning is for the wealthy. That you should only, to your question, that you should only set up a trust if you're worth millions and millions of dollars. And that's truly not the case. So, to answer your question, a trust is really helping set those very direct instructions on here are my assets. I have children, maybe they're under the age of 18, and you can actually set up specific instructions on how you want those assets distributed to your kids.
Okay.
So if we use an example, $500,000 insurance policy, would you want an 18-year-old or a minor to get that? Very likely not. So it's how you can actually specifically say, maybe you want your kids to receive their assets at ages 25, 35, so you can make those decisions. And then really, Sebastian, the big problem we're helping avoid is probate. Probate is the process of if you don't make those decisions,
Yeah.
someone else is going to make them for you. And that someone else is going to be a judge. And that's also where you hear kind of the unfortunate stories of family conflicts and all that. So it's a very, really, from my perception, selfless decision because when you're dead, you're dead. It's how can you make it really easy for your loved ones to make sure that they don't have to go through that legal process.
So again, for someone who doesn't know, well, why doesn't a will do that for me?
Yeah, good question. So a will is still going through probate. And I will say every state is a little different regarding probate, the amount of assets on if that estate is going through probate or not. We won't get into the very details of that. But in essence, to answer your question, a will still goes through probate. And a trust is really going to help your family avoid probates in most cases completely.
So would I be putting my will in my trust?
Good question. So a trust actually includes a will within that.
within it?
So
Okay,
as an example, it would include like a pour over will, right? So it's included in the revocable living trust.
understand. Okay. Are there any other benefits like tax benefits or other protections that you get as an individual when you set up a trust and you put your assets in your trust?
There definitely could be. And and this is where obviously for a lot of, wealthy families, very advanced estate planning to really help with tax strategies. Absolutely. But what I would say, Sebastian, is for the 60-70% of families, nationwide, it's really just helping avoid the headache of probate process, which give you an example, or I live here in California. Probate in California can take more than a year, and you have to pay. It's not like a free like process.
Mhm.
There's a percentage typically of the estates. So in essence, and this is what, to the beginning of my introduction, I used to have to set up a probate account at the bank. And again, these funds can't be touched. So it's like if you need to pay for like funeral expenses or pay for the mortgage, whatever expenses, in a lot of those times, those, if it's going through probate, there's a lot of limitations on the access to it.
Right.
So I would say it's really just like making sure that, your loved ones have that peace of mind that there's really that plan in place for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. So a lot of well, majority of my audience are entrepreneurs or business owners. Um, but that's basically who we're talking to. What kind of benefits or advantages, or how can a business owner use a trust? And is there any way to tie your business into your trust?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So within a trust, you essentially can outline, your businesses that you own, the business interests that you have, and it's really going to help you as a business owner have a plan in place for if something happens to you, what would happen to that business, right? If there's obviously depending on the type of business, and it's, not something we'll get into much detail on, but depending on the type of business that you have, there's definitely some type of, various other different strategies to make sure that you have in place if something is to happen to you. But for a lot of, sole proprietorships, LLCs, that's definitely something that is included as part of the estate, which is super important. And it's something that, as a business owner, I think we become so focused on the business and building the business that we forget about, well, what do I want with the future of the business, right? Like exit strategy.
Mhm.
And then also the peace of mind to know that if something happened to me prior to me wanting to make a conscious decision to sell the business or et cetera, that obviously it would be, that there's a plan in place to make sure that that's included in the plan as well.
So tell me what kind of assets or what goes into a trust? Like, you know, do I want to put my if I own a home, a property, do I want to put the property in the trust where the trust owns the title of the property? Is that how this works? My car that I drive, my life
Yeah.
insurance, what goes into a trust?
Yeah, good question. So essentially think of a trust as an entity, if you will. And then you have the entity, and then you have your buckets of assets. So to your
Before you continue,
example,
as an entity, does it actually have its own EIN number or tax ID number?
not for a revocable living trust.
Not for a revocable living trust. Okay.
There are some other types of trusts that do like an irrevocable, that yes, it actually has its own tax ID number. These are typically more advanced estate planning strategies for kind of what we're discussing today. A revocable living trust, no, it's under your social security number. You don't have to, typically you don't have to file a separate tax return for that whatsoever.
So
So
why and when would one create would so clarify for me revocable, irrevocable?
yeah, so revocable, I can make changes to it.
Okay.
So if I say these are the beneficiaries, these are the assets that I have, this is how I want to make those distributions to them,
Hmm.
I can always make changes to them. I can
Okay.
go in, I can remove, I can add, etc., etc. Irrevocable is typically for more high net worth families that are doing some, more defined strategies to really help with the distribution of the estate. maybe for estate taxes. So that trust can't be changed. It's irrevocable.
And is was there a difference between the two, and versus one being based on the individual's social security number and the other having its own tax ID number?
Ask me that one more time.
So
I'm not sure.
you said that there was a what when, just clarify for me, when does a trust have its own tax ID versus not having its own tax ID?
Irrevocable
Mhm.
typically has its own tax ID number.
So an irrevocable will have its own tax ID number, and then a revocable will not. It can, or it will not.
It typically won't.
It won't.
Most of the times it doesn't for revocable. Revocable living trusts are the most popular types of trust, which is what Trust and Will offers.
Hmm.
So basic, customizable, but you can, again, make changes to it. And again, it doesn't have the complexities of filing its own tax return or anything like that for it.
Okay, so from my understanding, right, and this is learning for me and for my audience, right? Um, One of the reasons I would want to set up a trust is because it does have its own tax ID number, and if it has its own tax ID, then my assets are owned by the trust, and
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily, because a revocable living trust won't have its own tax ID number. It's
right.
under your own social security number.
So if I wanted it to be that way, then I would make it an irrevocable, right? And the trust would own the assets, right? And I would be the trustee, so I would control the trust and the assets in the trust, but the assets are owned by the trust, right?
Correct. Same with a revocable living trust. Both trusts have the same. So
Okay.
I'll use me as an example.
Okay.
I have a revocable living trust. So the actual owner, if you will, of my assets, it's the Mazabel Living Trust, as an example.
Okay.
So, and then I am the trustee. So I can make decisions, I can make changes to the trust, and then I have beneficiaries of the trust, right? So to answer your original question, my home that I do own, I have the name of the deed is under the Mazabel Living Trust.
Okay.
The purpose of that is obviously to help avoid probate. So if I go out today and something happens, this home is owned by the Mazabel Living Trust.
Okay.
So from there, that would essentially help say, great, who are the beneficiaries of the Mazabel Living Trust, so that it could start the process of this condo being moved from me or from the trust to the beneficiaries.
Hmm.
And to explain a little bit more on your question, which is a great one, same thing with, for example, my investments, right? So any taxable investments that I have, those are owned by the trust. For retirement accounts, and again, for anyone on your audience, this is not legal advice. We have specific instructions on guiding you on what is best on how you should title retirement accounts, as there are some tax consequences. So again, this is informational. We have a lot more resources that help in how you should title your assets into the name of the trust. But to wrap it up, it's once you get your assets into the name of the trust, for most of them,
Hmm.
that is what's really going to help in avoiding probate.
Understand. Okay. Now, for my clients that are looking to leverage life insurance, not just for the death benefit, but because of the living benefits of life insurance, there's a whole life insurance that gives them high cash value access, where they can use that cash value in the policy while they're alive. And
Absolutely.
so it's very flexible. And there's an option when you're purchasing the policy to purchase it where the trust owns the policy. You, the individual, are the insured, and then the trust can also be the beneficiary, right? Can you just talk to us a little bit about, if you're setting something like that up, what would you recommend, or what would be the structure that you would recommend to your average person in terms of that trust and that whole structure and functionality?
To answer your question, if you're just setting up a revocable living trust,
Hmm.
you do have the ability to add, life insurance policies as the beneficiary of it, for example. so that instead of, if I've, for example, my example, life insurance policy, term policy, great. My beneficiary of that is not, you can include just direct individuals,
Hmm.
but depending on the company, typically you are also have the ability to add the trust as the beneficiary.
Hmm.
So then it would go from the policy to the trust to the beneficiaries
Right.
outlined on the actual policy.
Okay.
Or sorry, not on the policy, on the in the trust.
Okay. Alrighty. So there are many different types of trusts, right? And can you tell us about some of the different, without getting into just all the details of each of the different types of trusts, but maybe just name off some of the different types of trusts that are available, and then of course specifically then which one of those does Trust and Will provide services for?
Yeah, and this is typically where there's I don't know, maybe 3 to 5, if not more, types of trust. 80 to maybe 90% of people do typically a revocable living trust because it's simple,
Hmm.
straightforward. But a couple other use cases are special needs trust. So as an example, families that have kids that are special needs or even adults. So it's a specific trust set up for the benefit of that individual.
Hmm.
So that's much more kind of specific. There's also a testimony trust, which are common for folks and parents that have kids under the age of 18. So I have kids under the age of 18. If something happens to me and they're still not 18, up on my passing, it would actually create a trust for the benefit of the children. And then most commonly, really the irrevocable trusts as well. So again, that's more typically we see this more for higher net worth. So typically when you're getting into a taxable estate, so over 11 million dollars on the federal level, that's typically where you start seeing other different strategies. But the revocable living trust is again what we offer. Definitely not to say that's the right fit for everyone because we're not providing legal advice, but it's most commonly used because it's the most basic type of trust to really help say, these are my assets, this is how I want them distributed, and really having those specific instructions there.
Gotcha. If you would please tell me a little bit about, what are the typical costs for setting up a trust?
Yeah, it's a good question. So specifically at Trust and Will, we offer a revocable living trust for $699 for a couple, and then $599 for an individual.
That's it. I've seen attorneys charging $5,000 to $10,000 to set up a trust.
Yeah, yeah. In many cases, it's very very expensive for most people. So the way we've really done this, Sebastian, is really implemented a TurboTax like model
Hmm.
that guides folks through the process. And what's really nice is so it's a DIY model, but we actually provide live member support. So if you're watching this, you're probably watching it because you have questions about estate planning that you've always been wondering. So we actually help guide you through the process. So if you have questions, you can chat with us. If you want to talk to someone, you can schedule a call. And even in some states, you actually have the ability to pay an additional $200 and talk to an estate planning attorney in that state. So to some of your questions you were asking previously, those are great questions to ask, for an individual or a family to talk more about, this is my situation, my business, what is the best way to really execute an estate plan that reflects my wishes.
Hmm.
And then outside of the trust, we also offer our best or our last will and testament package, which is $259 for a couple or $159 for an individual. And outside of just the will and the trust, this also includes your power of attorney. So again, this is something that everyone should have in place. And I can tell you this from many years in banking, it's something that you just never know what can happen. And it's really nice peace of mind for someone to be able to walk into the bank or make a real estate transaction or pay your bills, something as simple as that. Very important.
Yeah.
Your living will, which is your healthcare, also known as a healthcare directive.
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, if you're, in the hospital and you can't make a decision on what type of care you want to receive while you're in the hospital, this outlines decisions that you've already made. So think of not putting your family in a situation where a family member wants to do this and the other wants to do that. and then the doctor's recommending something. So it's really helping make sure that you have that in place. And then the basic HIP authorization. This is an overlooked one. It's essentially who can access your healthcare records. This is actually really common for parents that have kids that go to college or turn 18. We have the assumption that they're my kid, I can get any information on them, but once they're of legal age, it's much harder, right? There's a lot of privacy laws when it comes to your healthcare information. So making sure, hey, if something happens, who could access my healthcare records is something that is also included as part of the estate plan.
Okay. Um, can you kind of paint a picture for me for a new client? What kind of experience are they going to have? Like, what's the first step? Then what happens next as they go through the process of setting up a trust with trust and will?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really just a matter of one, starting the process. And from there, we help with education and our support in determining a trust or a will to start if you're using trust and will specifically. And then also, if you don't use trust and will, just, as long as you get it done, great. This is typically the same process with like an attorney, which is like the discovery. So, is it you? Is it you and your spouse? And then who else in the estate plan? Right? So it's really making those decisions. And we have a really nice checklist that really helps outline what decisions you need to make and what do those decisions mean. And these are super important. And I will say, people drag their feet on them
Hmm.
because it's very important. So we help as much as we can in making sure that people can make that decision quick, or not, maybe not quick, but thoughtfully, right?
Hmm.
And then also making sure as well that you can make changes. It doesn't mean that because you chose Aunt Sally as your guardian that you can never make that, you can never make changes, because life changes.
Right.
So once you make those decisions, you're going through the process, you're inputting everything in the system, you're being guided. If you need help, again, you can talk to someone. And then great, I go through the full process and I get the documents in the mail. I just had my trust that I just put it away. I wanted to show you what it looks like, but I can download them or I can have them shipped to me.
Okay.
And in most states, it's a matter of getting these documents notarized to make them legally binding. So we provide instructions on, what you need to get notarized. And then from there, it's typically a matter of making sure that people named inside your estate plan know that you named them in your estate plan and
Mhm.
what their role actually means.
Understand.
So if you're a beneficiary or if you're a successor trustee, it's really important for people to know that and where the trust is available. So this is a very nice feature that we've created with Trust and Will, is the shared access, where I can electronically and securely share my estate planning documents with my financial advisor, with a beneficiary, with a successor trustee, etc. And then trust funding, which is a process we talked about previously. That's super important for a trust, is in certain assets, making sure that we're putting the trust as the owner or beneficiary of the account.
Hmm.
And then from there, Sebastian, it's really just making updates to it. And this is something we're very passionate. We want people to be very proactive about making updates and changes to their estate plan. So we have a portal where it's easy. You can log in, you can update it as you have kids. Maybe you move states, bought or sold a home, open a new business, things like that within your life that obviously are super important for you to make sure that you have that updated on your estate plan.
Awesome. How difficult is it to add assets, into the trust once the trust is set up? If like not when you're doing it, but later on, if you do want to, switch over the deed from your property or your assets, is it a very tedious, challenging task, or what does that look like?
I mean, for most accounts, if it's like a tax, an investment account, it's simply going to that institution or to your financial advisor, and there's typically like a retitling form to move the account from your name to the name of the trust.
Hmm.
So that's fairly simple. The deed transfer, so if it's, real estate, it can depend on the state, on the complexities of it. If you do it totally manually, it's typically getting a form from your county recorder's office, and saying that, you have a home, it's titled under you and your wife, but you want to change it to the name of the trust. You do file it directly with the county, but also keep in mind that process can be a little bit tedious. That is a service that we do offer at Trust and Will for clients that say, Trust and Will help me transfer my deed or my home into the name of the trust. That is a service that we offer.
Now, can I only transfer the deed on a property or an asset that I fully own outright, or if I still have an open loan with a bank, you know,
Good question.
how does that work?
Yeah, if you have a loan, for example, this condo has a mortgage on it. Yes, you can add the trust as the name of the deed.
Of the deed. So the loan is still in my name. I'm still the guarantor, still responsible for the loan. But the deed itself can be transferred to the trust at that point.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's good to know. Um, let's think. Can you give me any examples of circumstances where, where you've seen or experienced a business owner using a trust in conjunction with their business?
Yeah, I mean, in essence, the most simple example, it's like, sole proprietorship, right? So it's still owned 100% by that individual or that, couple in some instances. So it's just a matter of like making sure that in the estate plan you have, I don't know, Mazabell carpet cleaning, right? And it's maybe a sole proprietorship, but it's saying that those assets are owned by you. That business is owned by you. So you would go in there, say, what's your business interest as an example? Do you own 50% of it, 100% of it as an example, right? And then from there, really just making sure that that's part of your legacy and that's part of your planning. So who would you want to pass that business over through, right? And then we won't get too much into it, but for corporations and all that, obviously that's different. You don't name a corporation as part of your estate plan. There's different strategies when it comes to that on who actually owns the corporation, right? Is it shareholders, etc. But that would be a conversation to definitely have with an estate planning attorney when it comes to that.
Okay. What are the ongoing costs of keeping an account or a relationship as a client with Trust and Will?
Good question. So you set up a trust. Let's call it 699 for two people, and for that first year, it's full access to make updates, changes, anything like that to the estate plan. After the first year, we have optional memberships. We have a fairly high opt-in rate for the memberships. These essentially for the trust, it's $39 a year or $19 for the will. It allows you to make updates, changes to the estate plan as you need. We also just recently built out a vault feature. So if you're like, hey, I have my, life insurance policies, all kinds of documents, you can upload these into the vault to make it easier. And then also the shared access, right? Making sure that people that you want to have access to your estate plan can very easily access it via a secure link.
Okay. So the vault is that connected to the trust, or is that just something separate that you're providing?
It's, well, you're creating the trust on our system, on our platform,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So part of a feature of the platform of creating the trust is having access to the vault,
Okay.
which allows you to upload documents in it. So now think I can log into trustandwill.com. I can see my estate plan
Hmm.
there. And then I can also have access to the vault, which I would be able to say all my documents that are very important are kind of in one place.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. All right. Is there anything that you can think of that I have not asked that would be valuable information that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, it's a good question. When should you think about estate planning? This is such a big misconception. And again, we have misconceptions on I will set up an estate plan when I'm older. I will set up an estate plan when I'm worth, just throw a number. When my net worth is over $1 million, because that's real value. Or hey, I'm not ready to set up an estate plan. I'm building my wealth. Maybe I just have a 401k, checking savings accounts, and nothing really. You're starting to build your wealth.
Hmm.
All these examples are examples of Everyone should have an estate plan. And this is why we made it so accessible for people starting at $159 for a will. It's making sure that you have, it's estate planning is not just about the passing and distribution of your assets, but also the healthcare, the power of attorney. So that's a big misconception. We're starting to really see that shift. Caring.com did a study last year, and for the first time in history, millennials are creating more estate plans at a faster rate than people over 50. So, again, that just shows you if you're having your first kid, but maybe you don't own a home yet, you don't own a business yet, you work W-2, it's making sure that you're protecting your newborn or your pet in some cases. So, hopefully this helps educate a little bit on just estate planning isn't just for the wealthy. It's really for everyone to make sure that you have that peace of mind for you and your loved ones.
Awesome. When inside of a trust, is it true that I'm able to create like if then statements in terms of the future distribution of my wealth or my assets? So, for example, let's say my daughter, she's 10 years old, something happens to me, I can say if she earns a certain, let's say a 4.0 GPA by the time she graduates high school, then she can receive X amount of dollars from my um, as her inheritance distribution, right? But if 5 GPA, then she will only get this amount, and then set kind of those if then statements as kind of milestones throughout her life to be able to have access to different amounts of distribution of the inheritance. Is that a true statement?
You can definitely do that.
Yeah.
I mean, online platforms like ours have limitations when it comes to, very specific, as you said, 4.0, 5.0, right? But I mean, absolutely. There's definitely like if you're working directly with like an estate planning attorney,
Hmm.
100%. If my kid goes to an Ivy Leagues college, then they get this, right? Like very, very specific.
Hmm.
There's definitely the ability for you to do that.
Yeah. Because I know for myself, if when I was younger, going through high school, if I had those types of milestone motivational rewards, I'd probably would have paid more attention in math class, to say the least,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's a pretty cool feature, as far as the future distribution of one's wealth or hard work money. I'm not sure what the quote or the statistics are, but I believe it's that most people that are um, self-made millionaires, that wealth will dwindle away, if not on the second generation, but in the third generation because of mismanagement and misappropriation of that wealth, right?
Spot on.
And so one way you can mitigate that is by setting up a trust and creating some rules and guidelines on how that wealth can be distributed, and of course, educating your children and your those who would be inheriting your money on finance literacy and being responsible stewards of course that inheritance, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's spot on. I mean, a lot of times, in for many families, like the term legacy is like very important. It's very deep, right? And it's a lot, for many people, many families, it's important to them. It's important for them to build wealth, like generational wealth, right? Like this is the wealth that I built through my lifetime, and how do I want to pass that through my legacy? And these are the conversations that we want people to have more often,
Yeah.
to sit down with their spouse or yourself if you don't have a spouse, and really think about what is that vision, what does that future look like, because we can get so invested in just the day to day.
Right.
And especially if your audience is a lot of business owners, I get it. I used to work with a lot of business owners in banking, and it's a matter of like think for the future, think for what does your exit strategy look
Right.
like, how do you want this business to be sold or passed on or whatever the case might be. So great conversations to really have, because it's important. And I will say many people say, yes, I'll get to it, yes, I'll get to it, they don't get to it, and then they really go through that process of of probate and that messy system as well.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I don't know if you know this, but um, the word succession is the
Hmm.
only word in the English dictionary that has the word success in it.
I love it. I love it. That is new to me.
Hmm. Pretty cool. Well, awesome. Of course, there will be a link in the description below for Trust and Will. So anyone who is watching this can, of course, go ahead and click that link and submit. Now, when somebody submits, do they have like a? Is there a entry level, like a free trial, or is there a? Can they kind of look in the platform before they make an immediate commitment, or how far in can they go before they have to, make a payment to?
Yeah, we made it very easy. We also have a lot of flexibility. So you probably 25% through, you're going to be asked for a payment.
Okay,
Prior to that, you can schedule a call with our team. You can chat with our team. You can learn more about the platform. And also keep in mind, we're not going to twist someone's arm to make a purchase.
right.
If you make a purchase and you're like, hey, this actually wasn't what I'm looking for, no problem. We do have a 30-day money back guarantee.
Okay, that's great. Awesome. Okay. Anything else you want to share? Any added value that you think would be great?
Commend you for helping bring this topic and conversation. I know, talking about death, it can be overwhelming, or for some people, we want to avoid it, but it's really a conversation that we want to get more comfortable with, because the long-term implications of not having something in place are much more difficult than you avoiding a conversation.
I agree, 100%. There's only a few things guaranteed in life, and death is one of them. And so
That,
it's better to get ahead of that and have those conversations, and it gives you peace of mind, and then obviously your voice can be heard even after you're gone through your trust.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
well,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
you having me on, and thank you again.
Yes, thank you for joining me today.